When you read books and watch movies, often you find yourself identifying with the main characters. You become the protagonist in a way where you are trying to overcome whatever obstacles they have and reach the goal of whatever that particular creative work is. Whether it's to save the town or stop a runaway train or have a baby, there's all sorts of different goals and challenges depending on the situation that's presented by the author or director. And they are trying to make you embody that character and feel the challenges that the protagonist has upon them as you try to overcome those forces. Now, games work a little more directly because, of course, you are taking an active role in those games. You can more readily become those characters. So it's no surprise you see a lot of games that adapt books and movies and put you in those roles. One of the most successful games along these lines in the past few years has been Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, a release by Forest Prison Creative as the designer and USAopoly as the publisher. This came out in 2016 and it adapts the 7 books or movies, however you want to think of it, in the Harry Potter world, and you play through them and it embodies the nature of that creative work where you are cooperatively trying to overcome the dark forces. You become Harry or Hermione or Ron or Neville. It's a 4-player game. Neville gets shoved in there too. And you work through the years just like you do in the books and the films, where you have 7 different boxes. You start with box 1, which is year 1. And then if you complete that, you can go into year 2, which is going to add more things, new characters, new spells, new locations you visit, new villains who you have to confront. So this game line has now been transformed, released in a new way as Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures, again designed by Forest Prison Creative under the Prospera Hall pseudonym they use, and published by the Op, which is the new name for USAopoly. This works a little differently than Harry Potter. It's for a younger age range, ages 8 and up instead of 11 and up. The game time is typically shorter in each of the games. It's a bit simplified in terms of the challenges you have to overcome. There's also been some modifications in the game structure, which I think addresses some issues people had with Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I'll talk about those a little bit later. But the goal is still the same, where you and your fellow players are embodying toys from the Toy Story films or the short cartoons, and you are trying to overcome the challenge. The box comes with 6 adventures. The first 3 adventures are Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. The 4th adventure is something else based on a short. The 5 and 6, I don't know what they are yet because I haven't got there. I played 8 times on a review copy from the Op. Went through 1 to 3 relatively easily, and now 4 has just killed us over and over and over again. Before I get into that, though, let me show you how this works. Here are some of the components for Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures. I've laid out only the components needed for Adventure 1 so that I don't spoil material that is included in Adventures 2 to 6. Although if you've watched Toy Story 2 and 3, you will know some of what's included in boxes 2 and 3. Each player is going to represent one of these characters. Technically, you don't open Jessie until Adventure 2, but you can pull out Jessie early if you want to use her ahead of time. You take the character, you're going to have a health tracker. You set up the board for Adventure 1. You've got a small number of hazards, with the bottom hazard being escape from Sid, because, of course, that's what you have to do in Toy Story 1, escape from Sid and get together with a family and join Andy again before they reach their new house. If this token arrives at that house before you escape from Sid, then you've been lost and Andy will have to live on without you. Hopefully that doesn't happen. You have a set of danger cards, which are shuffled and they present different challenges for you. You have adventure cards that you are going to add to your deck. Each player starts with a deck of 10 cards. These are specific to Buzz. Many of the cards are generic. The traits in this case just give you 1 imagination, which is the currency of the game. It's the money. So they just give you 1 money. Then I have some few cards that are specific to Buzz and traits. You shuffle those up. You have a starting deck. Every player will have their own unique elements in their deck. I'm going to move this down here and move Buzz up here to show you the board. Although in the Adventure 1, you don't use these spaces, so you don't need them too much. On a turn, you are going to draw a danger card from the deck. In Adventure 1, you are only going to draw one card no matter what. In later adventures, you might have to draw 2 or 3 as you progress and get closer to losing the game. The tension will escalate. But Adventure 1, you draw 1 card, you read it out. Active toy loses 1 heart. Advance the token 1 space. Each player starts with 10 hearts. If you get down to 0, you are shelved, which is bad. I'll explain that in a bit. Advance the token 1 space. And that's a timer. Not every card will advance the token, but some of them will. So you have to look out for those. There's ways to survey the deck and try to avoid those. And there's ways to push the token back. After you resolve the number of danger cards for whatever is appropriate, you are going to do the effect of the hazards that are out. In Adventure 1, you start with only 1 hazard. In this case, active toy loses 1 heart. So no matter what else happens with the danger cards, the active toy is going to lose 1 heart. Then, the player is going to use their 5 cards in their hand and do things. In this case, I have 4 imagination available with which to buy cards. These cards are all from Adventure 1. It has the cost down in the lower right-hand corner here. Whenever I buy something, it's going to go to my discard pile, and it will get shuffled into my deck once I run through my deck here. It's a standard deck building game if you've played one of those before. So I can spend 4 money to buy the cautious trait. I have this item here, my laser. I can gain 1 insight. And insight is used to overcome hazards. So I can put everything on my board as I acquire it. It's fairly straightforward in Adventure 1 and even 2. You can just do things as you acquire the resources. In this case, you can assign insight to a hazard, and once we get 6 insight on this hazard, it is immediately removed, and everyone gets the reward that is shown here. In this case, 1 imagination and 1 heart. Okay. I used all my items. If I play another item, I would get another money, but my hand has no more items. But maybe I need to buy more items so that I can better use my laser light ability. I end my turn by refilling this. This is discarded. And the next player will go. They lose 2 hearts unless they discard a friend. There are 3 adventure card types in the game. You have traits, you have items, and you have friends. So you probably want to get some of each, but it depends on what you want to specialize in. Buzz, he wants items because, as you can see with my laser light, I get a bonus if I use it. And as you advance further in the game, you go through a different adventure, you can get a personal ability that carries with you, and Buzz really wants items. I'll say that. I've been playing only 2-player games so far. The other player has been playing Rex, where Rex gives a bonus whenever he gains hearts on his turn, or he makes someone else gains hearts. He makes someone else gain hearts. They get a bonus heart. So each character has their own bonus that you will acquire later on. So the player does this. You have this other hazard. Maybe my turn comes around again, and active toy loses 2 unless they discard a friend. So here's my current deck. I can discard the space alien so I don't lose 2 hearts, or of course I can choose to play the space alien to gain 2 hearts. So in this case it's a wash, unless I really wanted to get the insight off this card in order to advance on defeating this hazard. Let's say I just discard it. I have this one here, gain 1 imagination. I'm going to put items I acquire on top of my deck. Oh, that increases the odds of me actually getting them. I have 4 money. I'll spend 3 to get this item and put it on top of my deck. And then I shuffle everything, draw a new hand of 5 cards, and carry on from there. So you're going to continue playing until either the token reaches this location and you don't move it back on your turn if you are the active player. As long as you move it back, then you have more time and the game does not end. In Adventure 1, if you defeat this hazard, it's discarded. You turn up a new hazard. You have to defeat that. It's got a different effect, a different reward. In this case, you cannot draw extra cards. Well, that's not good. In this case, whenever the danger hazard causes you to discard a card, you lose hearts. That's sometimes bad. Well, losing hearts is never good. But Moreover, there are some cards that have an extra bonus when you discard them, such as Legs here. Legs gets you only 1 imagination, but if you discard it, and you can't choose to discard a card, you can only discard it as a result of an effect or a cost. So if I discard Legs for some reason, such as discarding a friend here, then both I gain imagination and so do my neighbors, the players on my left and right. So this is actually more powerful in a certain situation, and it gives you some defense against the danger cards in the deck. So you must go through all of these hazards, end up with trying to escape from Sid, who is going to hammer you much more than the other cards, but if you get 8 insight on Sid before this token gets to the house, you win. There's a quick overview of Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures, and like Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, it is described on the front of the box as a cooperative deck building game. But the idea is this is really a deck building game for people who don't know about deck building games or who don't care about them. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle was carried in a lot of bookstores in regular locations, non-game stores, and presented to people who may not know modern games, may not think of themselves as game buyers, but because of the Harry Potter license, it would attract them to it, and it served as an introduction to what deck building is. You don't even have to really care that it's deck building or not, you just learn how that works without caring about that particular term. I have a spell book, I'm going to add more spells and abilities to it, and do things with it. I'm not thinking of it as a deck building game, I'm not coming through the Dominion line of creations, but instead just being Harry Potter and living in that world. And the Toy Story Obstacles and Adventure games works the same way because you don't have to know or care about deck building. You just have something and say, yep, I'm Buzz. This is what I can do. And then I'm going to get other things, and I'm going to acquire Mr. Potato Head and Ham and all these other characters and different traits. Thanks, all decorated with a little alien head. Add those to my deck and then do stuff. And it feels very authentic to the movies as you are playing through them with the different situations presented to you. And they've done a fairly decent job of matching up abilities to characters as well as they can. Now, one thing that was interesting about Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle is that it's a 2 to 4 player game. This is 2 to 5. But there were lots of commentary, that the 4-player game was incredibly hard while the 2-player game was not. And that relates to the nature of the hazards in play as well as the dangers, because in a 4-player game, 3 other people are taking turns before my turn comes back around. Whereas in a 2-player game, it's only 1 other person. And lots of the danger cards and the hazards, or in the original game, the dark arts cards and the villains, do things to players when it's not their turn. You get affected in some way. So I may not be doing anything, but I'm losing health. And if you run out of health, well, bad things happen. In both games, you have to, so your health is all the way down to nothing. I have to discard half my hand. We have to advance the marker 1 space, and sometimes there's hazards when you advance marker 1 space, it goes an extra space. So it just pushes everything along. If you have any items that are stored on your board, because someone may play a card where everyone gains money or everyone gains insight, well, now you have to throw all those away. So you throw away all the tokens, you throw away half your hand, you advance the token, which in some later adventures will make you draw more danger cards, depending on where the token is. All this stuff happens when it's not your turn. So there's a greater chance of you being shelved or being knocked out in the Harry Potter game without you doing anything. There's no response to it unless other players are playing cards that let you gain health. So this changed a little bit in Toy Story in 2 different ways. Number 1, you have adventure maps that now differ depending on the number of players. So with a 4 and 5 player game, you have a different timeline than you do in the 2 and 3 player game. And this carries over with other adventures. So here's the board from Adventure 2. So the 4 and 5 player board and the 2 and 3 player board has fewer spaces. So you've got more time to win, which gives you more time to do things. And as you can see, you've got to draw a 2 mark here when the token moves along the track. And if it starts here or later on your turn, you're drawing 2 cards, which the adds more things going on. The other big change relates to the cards in the decks themselves. Here are a few cards in Toy Story that seem to address the possibility that a 4 and 5 player game will be more difficult than a game with 2 players. These cards, Mr. Potato Head and RC, give a benefit to everybody at the table. So in a 2-player game, all toys get 2 money or 2 imagination, so you're handing out 4 money with this card, whereas in a 5-player game, you're handing out 10 money. So people are effectively doing things when it's not their turn. They're piling up resources, so when their turn does come around, they will be able to do more because you can buy multiple cards in a turn to juice up your deck, so you can do that more quickly and have more effective turns when your turn does come around, thanks to these additional resources. Here, RC gives everyone a heart, so it can help you overcome the effect of the hazards or the dangers. With Cooperative, you have choices. Any one toy gains 2 hearts. Okay, I recall a similar card from Harry Potter. But in addition, if it's a neighbor, you gain 1 imagination. You get money, you get compensation. You are not just wasting your card, put quotes around that, wasting it by helping someone else, but you still get something from it. So the card is effectively better in a team sense, that you're helping someone and you're still getting something from it to ideally buy something else. Although, of course, if you need the hearts, just use them for yourself. The bigger change comes with the Army Men. So Army Men here gives a choice, gain 2 hearts, or all toys gain 1 heart. Again, much more benefit in a 5-player game. You spread that out and everyone benefits from it. Or maybe you just need to keep someone alive, you yourself alive in this case. Moreover, the first time someone else plays an Army Man, so let's say someone plays the Recon Expert, you say, oh, wait, my medic comes out. And you read this on the bottom, all toys get a heart. So the Army Men work together as a unit when other people play them. So you don't want to buy up all the Army Men yourself. You want everyone to have 1 or 2, and that way you get the benefit as you're playing them. So here, the Recon Expert, if someone plays the medic, you bring out the Recon Expert, and you and that other player each draw a card. Again, benefiting you when it's not your turn, but the other players as well get something out of it. There's only these 2 types in Adventure 1, but more Army Men come in later adventures. One final change, sort of a 2.5 change. When you're laying out the adventure cards, if you have 2 cards that are the same, you stack them up so they don't take up 2 spaces on the display, which sometimes happen in Harry Potter, where you get the board clogged with things you did not need, special cards that were not helpful based on whatever particular hazard you were facing, and so you didn't want to buy them, but they would sit there and take up space, or they're too expensive, you can't afford them. Now here you stack them up, and when someone buys one, okay, next one is still available. When that's bought, you're going to now, at the end of the turn, reveal a new card from the deck. Hand in the box. You can gain insight or discard it, and you and your neighbors each draw a card. Again, benefiting other players for a particular action to help you along. Once you have finished Adventure 1, you can go to Adventure 2, which is based on Toy Story 2. You're going to open that box, which is going to add new adventure cards. You shuffle into that deck. New danger cards, you shuffle into that deck. And hazard cards that you will shuffle with the other cards or replace. So Escape from Sid no longer matters because you have already done it. You're done with that movie. The other hazards stay in play, but now your game-ending challenge is to get away from Prospector Pete. Now, note that this says, when you defeat Pete, you win. Not quite true. The rulebook has a few shortcomings, and one of them is that it does not address this issue where this card clearly says the reward is you win. So you might think as soon as this comes out, I just focus entirely on Pete. No. You must defeat all the hazards in play. You are going to have 2 hazards in play at the same time in Adventure 2, and you can assign insight to them as you wish, except that once Pete comes out, you can only defeat the other hazard, and then once that's gone, now you can go after Pete. So, little quirks with the rules that don't explain that, but someone from the op has gone on to BGG and answered questions that makes that clear. In Adventure 3, you're going to have 3 hazards out, and you have to defeat Lotso. If you've seen the movie, you probably could have guessed that. And again, you cannot go after Lotso until all of the other hazards are gone. So small bits of missing information in the rules make it a little harder to play, which is too bad because this game is aimed at, I would think, more family-oriented audience that may not necessarily have experience with deck building rules, and they just have to wing it when they have some sort of conflict where this says you win and this says all hazards and I don't know what to do and whatever, we'll just go do this. And it doesn't really matter unless you want to play strictly by the rules, which might make a harder or easy adventure depending on what rule is missing. Because in the rulebook, after all the rules, you go to a section that says reminders, and one of the reminders is something that was not mentioned before, namely that if you do not buy any adventure cards on a turn, you can take all the cards on display, put them on the bottom of the deck, and turn up 6 new ones, or 6 different new cards, stacking duplicates, as mentioned before. And this is really needed as you get into later adventures because the cost of the adventure cards often goes up. Your starting money does not go up. So if you can't buy anything, then you're just kind of stymied and you're going to stay at the same level, but the dangers will keep coming and you'll keep getting effect from the multiple hazards in play and you will quickly die, as happened to us. And then I reread the rulebook and I discovered this and I said, oh, we could have just put all those cards on the bottom and turn up new ones. And ideally, you're going to have some inexpensive ones that will help you get going and charge up your engine. You need those little qualifiers to make sure everyone is okay. One small other errata: in Adventure 1, you put out 1 hazard card at a time. Adventure 2, you put out 2. Adventure 3, you put out 3, even though the rules say 2. It's supposed to be 3. Fight 3 at once, so you have multiple hazard effects coming on. So there's a few difficulties in how things work, but it's a great challenge in general. Just like the Harry Potter game, it works the same way. It's the same type of system, and it is really interesting just to see how things get more complicated the more you advance in the system, because things in general are just getting harder. So you start with this many danger cards. There are some duplicates. You see the effects that are coming. So as you play through the games, well, by Adventure 4, you're adding about as many danger cards as were previously in there. So you have more variety, more effects, more things happening, more complications. The number of hazard cards bumps up as well. So you have longer games as you're trying to get through those cards. For the adventure cards, here's the original deck from Adventure 1. By Adventure 4, you're adding twice as many cards as were in there. So you have a deck that is 3 times the size as it was originally, which means you're not going to see the same cards and you're going to have a wider variety of effects. You can't rely on getting the things that you want. You're still going to have a mix of items and friends and traits, but it's not the same. So you can't just go for the same thing and hope it works out for you, which is similar to Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. Final thing to mention, Adventure 4, which is based on a Toy Story short, not one of the movies. It changes up the game a fair amount. You still have the deck of adventure cards. You still have the dangers. Hazards work differently. You have a different challenge now to overcome. And again, the rules are not quite as clear as they could be in how everything works out, but you'll probably get the sense of how it works based on the rules. It is way harder. We have lost 5 times so far in Adventure 4. Everything else we won the first time we played. Although, again, we went after Pete without knowing we had to get the other things. Adventure 3, we would have lost the next turn. We just barely managed to scrape through and defeat Lotso. Adventure 4 has just killed us repeatedly. It's a very different, harder challenge to get through. Twist things up a lot. And I am curious to see what comes in Adventures 5 and 6. We will get there at some point. Maybe you will join me at the table as one of these fellows. Become a toy and start having adventures.